What you're about to hear is the re-release of an interview that I did with Varun Bhanot about a year and a half ago. But if you stay tuned, at the end, I do a catch-up segment. So if you've already heard his story, feel free to skip ahead towards the end of the interview. I'll pop in the exact minute mark in the show notes so you know exactly where to skip ahead to. Otherwise, if you haven't heard Varun's story, I highly, highly recommend listening to the entire interview. But I just wanted to give a heads up that this isn't just a straightforward re-release of an older interview. I do have an awesome catch up with him afterwards. Honestly, I recommend hanging around for that because Varun fills us in on how the business is doing now, what he's learned from fundraising over $5 million dollars in a very tough climate. Varun has honestly been super, super generous with very specific, very practical tips as it relates to fundraising, as it relates to how he scaled the business, performance marketing, specific creatives that have worked for him. So take my word for it, it's definitely worth sticking around for.
Was told by a health professional, you've got to make a big change soon or you're going to have problems later on, and I let my health go over that period, and it was quite crazy to be that person.
That's insane. Overnight success takes 1,000 nights.
Connected fitness is something that people are willing to spend money on in the home. In hindsight, what we didn't realize is what we were actually doing by doing that exercise is we ended up building out our own supply chain for what magic is now. There's no textbook that will teach you stuff like this.
Part of your board now, angel investors, including the chief product officer at Spotify, CEO of Heights.
I was the guy who used to always read those sort of TechCrunch articles and be like, how the hell do they get those people on board? This is one of the clear examples of where having a co-founder is so important.
You acclimatize yourself to that constant sense of uncertainty.
All the things that you would think would affect our business, you didn't think it would be something, something going on the other side of the world.
My next guest is someone who Virgin called "This is what a founder looks like." Now his products are stocked in Selfridges, has received press coverage in the likes of Sheerluxe, Evening Standard, The Times, and has recently secured $2.5 million in funding during one of the hardest times ever to raise venture capital investment. Founder and CEO of Magic AI, Varun Bhanot, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me. Yeah.
So let's rewind the clock a little bit. So you came from a bit more of a traditional background. You went into corporate law before deciding this is not the one.
Yeah, crazy, right? Ridiculous. It was a real journey. I mean, I thought I would go down a very traditional route initially, like, get a degree and go into a corporate role. And I think just in my first year, I remember going into this office in this investment bank and just going in and sitting in this box office and thinking, I've spent my whole life basically leading up to this moment where, finally graduated and done with school. And is this all my life's now going to be? Is it just going to be sitting here and pushing paper and looking at spreadsheets and numbers? And within about a year, I realized that it was time to either decide now or I'm going to be here for the next 40. So that's ultimately what happened.
Yeah, good for you. And it's funny that you made that decision. Even you were working in New York, so super cool part of the world, but it was like, no, this is not the one.
It was not the one. And actually, the one good thing I remember about being in New York, that was where I was originally working in a bank. I remember seeing the sort of tech scene, which was sort of not quite formed, but it was sort of bubbling beneath the surface. And I started wandering into various tech events and meetups and startup weekends. And there was nothing like that in London. I mean, I didn't even know what a startup was. And I don't think there was a single, there was not a single success story out of the UK at that time. So I just sort of leaned into my curiosity and just started, as I said, wandering into these events as a loner, just literally on my own, just trying to figure out what was going on. And that was really where I started getting inspired by all the innovation that could potentially happen. And when I came back to London, I saw that there was certainly something bubbling here, and I wanted a piece of it. I wanted to get in on the action.
That's a great point with you're lucky in that respect to be in New York, where it's a little bit ahead of the curve. I want to come back to this as well, because I know with your business, there's another much larger entity over stateside that's in a similar sort of field. So we'll touch back on that. But so you came back to London and went into startup land. Then you decided to then study entrepreneurship as well, which I find really fascinating. I don't think I've met anyone that's gone into business, founded a startup, but also felt the need to actually study, you know, not even business studies, but like entrepreneurship at university.
I was stupid enough to go and study it as well. No. You're right, actually. I didn't know many people who had done it either at that point.
What made you feel, why did you feel like you had the need
I'll be
to
very
study
honest,
it?
I had no idea what I was doing. I'd managed to sort of hustle a unpaid internship at this startup called Hubble. This was like 2014. I was the first employee there. There was just 3 of us. And I didn't know anything about the world of business, about entrepreneurs, obviously tech I didn't know much about. And so what I thought is, well, you know, I never learned anything about this when I was at uni, but maybe now I have the opportunity to do that. And fortunately, I saw there was a postgraduate course out there for entrepreneurship. It literally called postgraduate in entrepreneurship. And over the course, I think I did it part-time over 2 years and graduated in the end, which was a great experience. You always learn something looking back. I do have some views on it, whether I would recommend other people to do that. And the truth is that you don't need to do these things if you want to start a business, you want to go into entrepreneurship, you do not need to go to any course. And I know there's loads of these things on the internet nowadays trying to flog, like, learn how to do this. Honestly, the best way to learn is just by jumping like 2 feet in, and there will be mistakes and the learning curve will be very steep, but there is no substitution for actually just doing that and being it. And by the way, on that point, like most people you meet in business schools and people who do MBAs and stuff, the people teaching are not really entrepreneurs themselves. They are people who know a lot about management and have studied sort of things in the realm of finance and management. So they don't really know how, if you want to, I don't know, start a new water brand like this over here, they're probably not the people who are going to help you do that.
Subject matter experts in
Exactly.
their respective fields. It's like the saying goes, you know, plan is great until you get punched in the face, right? And it's compare that to studying courses, and I guess that's all the theory, and I'm sure you learn a lot, and perhaps the connections were one of the best things you got from that too.
Yes,
but
absolutely.
the reality of actually getting stuck in, there's so many variables, it's the real world you've actually got to, you know, put it in. So you went into startup land back here in London, did a part-time postgrad in entrepreneurship, and alongside this you had your own kind of fitness journey. So I heard that, I don't know whether I've got the timelines completely correct, but I heard that you took your body fat down from 27 to 7%. And you went from this diet of kebabs and whiskey. So I'm just curious about that as well before we get, you know, because obviously this all builds up to Magic AI. What was the impetus first and foremost for that? Like, did you have a
great question? So, you know, growing out of university and then going into this startup Hubble that I was at, it was a very stressful lifestyle, I guess, building an early stage company. Obviously, I wasn't the founder, but part of the founding team. So all the frustrations that come with being in an early stage. And I let my health go over that period. I had very bad habits that I'd probably picked up at university and never really recovered from. So I think you caught it. Yeah, whiskey and kebabs was the main menu most of the time. And I ballooned, to be honest with you, in my 20s. And I was told by a health professional at the time, said that, you know, you got to make a big change soon or you're going to have problems later on. And my family have lots of hereditary things, and I could see exactly the direction I was going in. And so one day I literally woke up, I got in touch with a personal training studio just down the road from here, actually, in London, in Shoreditch. And over the course of, I think, about 4 months, I lost, I think you got the numbers right. I think I came down from 27 or 30 down to about 7.
That's insane.
And did like a shoot and like a bit like this, actually, with all these cameras. And it was quite crazy to be that person, because, you know, I'd always seen these cover people on the covers of these Men's Health and all that. I never thought I would ever do that type of thing.
So you were one of those, you were like a before and after?
Yeah, exactly. Wow. Yeah. And
in a magazine or an ad campaign?
No, I don't think it came in any magazine. Not yet, anyway.
Just their own promotional.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, we did it just over there, and as I said, I'd never been that type of person to ever walk into a gym. I didn't know how to lift a weight. I was too scared, too intimidated. And I think going through that journey in the evenings and in the daytime, I was working in a tech company. It made me think, well, maybe there's a way how we could use technology to automate and democratize this experience for people at scale and bring this, it's quite expensive, but anywhere you go, personal training is pretty expensive. I mean, around here it would be, could be up to 100 an hour, and in other places maybe at cheapest you get is like 40 or 50 pounds an hour. So it's pretty expensive for anyone. And we started to think, well, can we use technology to automate this experience for people at scale? And that was really the seed of the idea, which led us to start building what we're building now with Magic.
And so you say us. So did you find a co-founder? How did things start to get going? Now we get into Magic AI.
Yeah. So my co-founder is Sunil, who I met when I was at Hubble. So he was heading up product over there. I did a terrific job. It's a completely different product. It was nothing to do with wellness and fitness, but had a clear, analytical, really smart product mindset. Much smarter than I'll ever be. And I was like, this is the exact kind of person that would be great. I think he came on board, it wasn't day zero. It was, I think we'd already had like a very rough prototype by then. And then he came on board, and then, the rest was history after that, which was great. Yeah.
And starting out, did you secure any external fundraising? Was it bootstrapped? How did you start to get this off the ground, especially for something that's like physical hardware?
Yeah, great question. It's really, really tough to bootstrap something which is hardware, but also something which is quite complex and large and heavy, and particularly if it has any kind of AI in it, which is a whole nother challenge and complexity. So the first thing we did was to fund. I knew that there was no way we were going to get any investment if we didn't at least have some kind of prototype that we could say, this is what we've got. It works. Here's a demo. And if you just give us a bit of money, we might be able to turn this into something. So I knew we had to get to that point, and without that, we wouldn't get very far. So we bootstrapped it as much as possible. We did two things. The first is we took out a startup loan by Virgin. So Virgin Startup, incredible organization. They give startup loans to people who literally have no track record. And it sounds as wacky as it is. But that initial capital got us just got the wheels turning, I suppose. And I took a desk, literally at an office on this road, actually, literally just a one person desk in a co-working space, so we could start moving things along. And I put the prototype up there. And the second thing we did was we raised money by bootstrapping. And the way we did that is during COVID, this was sort of 2020 going into 2021, we realized loads of people wanted fitness equipment. So nothing to do with actually what we're doing with Magic, but what we did is we managed to import a bunch of treadmills. We managed to secure a container of folding treadmills, and then we sold them just on Amazon and on our own website. And I think we managed to raise about 50K or something from doing that.
Wow.
And we used the proceeds of that to then fund the first prototype of the product. And what was really interesting is, in hindsight, what we didn't realize is what we were actually doing by doing that exercise is we ended up building out our own supply chain for what Magic is now. We learned about factories, we learned about freight, we learned about import and duty and VAT, and how to warehouse in the UK and do fulfillment for specifically for heavy products, because it weighed 20, 30 kilos. So we learned so much just by it. Kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, when it's like you learn by doing, and there's no textbook that will teach you stuff like this. You just have to go for it. It was a risk. We could have lost money doing it, but fortunately it worked out, and we managed to make a bit of a profit to just fund the first prototype. Yeah.
Amazing. Fantastic. And so for anyone who isn't as familiar with Magic AI, so obviously we've hinted, big heavy mirrors, are they for personal use, or are they more kind of B2B for gyms or both?
Yeah, so they're not too heavy. They're about 80. Although I did say heavy, I mean they're about 18 kilos, so a little bit heavier than a standard mirror you might just put up in your home because it has a whole computer in. But actually, when you see it, it doesn't really look like it's anything different. When it's off, it just looks like a beautiful piece of furniture. With the product, so what it is, yeah, it's a beautiful mirror. You put it up on your wall, or it leans up. You turn it on with a touch screen, and suddenly you have this hologram personal trainer that appears, and you can follow a series of like workouts, programs, classes that they put together for you. And so you can follow this trainer. There's a obviously it's mirrored, so you can see yourself at the same time. So when you're following their movements, you can kind of check, a bit like when you go to a gym studio, you can see yourself, right? Then where things get really freaky is there is an embedded camera inside. So when you're actually following the trainer, you will actually get live feedback into your form. It corrects you when you're doing it wrong. It counts your reps. It guides you on your weights and whether you need to increase or decrease. It gives you like a form quality score at the end. So really, kind of like what I was saying at the beginning, the big problem we set out to solve was how can we replicate one-to-one personal training and bring that hyper-personalized experience into the home. And using that AI that we've developed, that's how we do it. It's been so far so good.
What I love that you'd said to me before was overnight success takes 1,000 nights. So you've been going at it for a few years.
Yes.
And despite all the highs and the glitz and glamour that we all see online and everything else, obviously it's not all been plain sailing. No. So the theme of strategy and tragedy is obviously the highs and the lows, and you've come up against quite a few obstacles with your products, haven't you, along the way? So what's been some of the real shitstorms?
Yeah, great question. I think the very first one was just trying to convince investors that we were a product worth investing in. And I think part of the UK is that we are slightly more averse to hardware products, slightly more averse to kind of like all the connected fit. It's kind of like what we were just talking about, that a lot of the world's connected fitness success stories have all come from America, so we don't have a huge track record. So trying to convince people and investors that, yeah, we are not only is this a good idea, but we are the people who are actually going to execute this idea, was pretty difficult, right? We've got no experience in connected fitness really, other than my own personal journey. My co-founder is good at AI, but not like necessarily to the level that we could build this whole thing out. So that was a real obstacle, is trying to convince people that we were worth betting on. And I think the big thing that made the difference was getting that initial prototype out there.
Yeah, actually having something real. On that note, because I want to get into your fundraise again, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Anyone who's raised venture capital investment during these times is a huge achievement.
We'll have lots of grey hair, yeah. Or no hair.
A few more grey hairs coming through.
Yes.
And part of your investor board now are individual angel investors, including the chief product officer at Spotify, CEO of Heights. How did you get amazing people to invest? You say it's hard enough anyway to secure the fundraise. So talk us through really practical, did you already know those guys? Did you have to schmooze some mutual connections? How did you go about
There's
it?
definitely a lot of schmoozing with any, I think, fundraise. You've got to really play the game.
Dial up the schmooze.
That's for sure. So yeah, in fact, that's a good postgraduate to do in schmoozing. If there's a course out there.
University of Cambridge, you heard it here first.
Right. It's funny because I was the guy who used to always read those sort of TechCrunch articles and be like, how the hell did they get those people on board?
Right.
How have they got those angels involved? And it's funny because we never really initially went out to try and win this specific angel, that specific angel. It was very much like, we just need some money so we don't die. And we won a few initial angels, no one high profile or anything like that, who were just willing to put in a bit of money. When I say a bit of money, I mean I think they must have done like £1,000. So like very little money, but we were able to then take that and go out to other people and say, look, we've already got some people on board. We didn't tell them how much they were on board for. So look, we've got some people on board. It's this guy and this guy. And eventually sort of 1 became 2 and 2 became 4 and 4 became 8. And one of the investors was a guy who I literally just pitched to cold. His name's Dan Murray Serta. He's quite big on LinkedIn and Instagram and everything. He runs Heights, which is a brain supplement brand. And I was a customer of Heights. So I bought the product and subscribed to it. I'm still a subscriber. And after about a few months, I saw that he was investing in companies and always talking about it. I wrote him an email, but in the email, I didn't mention anything about our investment or our fundraise. I just emailed him, giving him feedback about his product, Heights. I said, why don't you increase the size of the bottle and it might fit through the letterbox? Just little random things like that. And have you considered, maybe doing a subscription which does this? And just random ideas that I had. And lovely guy he is, he replied and said, this is fantastic, thanks so much. And I've passed it to the product team and whatever. Then about a week or 2 weeks later, I shot him another email and just said, hey, by the way, we're doing a raise at the moment. And, I heard you angel invest. And you know what? He was completely on board. He pretty much said yes. I'm not even sure if it was the same day, but within about a week or so, he had said yes. And not only that, but he'd actually taken our deck and then sent it round to all of his pals, and some of them were some very high profile people who didn't actually invest, some of them, and we also got some really negative feedback from some people as well, which was really helpful because it helped us improve the pitch before we went to actual venture capital funds and things. But that's basically how it happened. If you ever want to get like high profile angels involved, I think if you can get the buy-in of one somehow, and even if you have to become a customer of theirs, there's no you've got nothing to lose, and if you can offer something to give them to start off with, it's a way of fostering and nurturing the relationship, right?
Fantastic. Yeah. That's so interesting. Thank you for breaking that down, because what we can take away from that, I think, is leverage the social proof. So get the ball rolling with whoever you can, even if they were putting in $1,000.
Yes.
They don't need to know that.
Right.
So leverage the social proof. And then strategically with those bigger bets is get on their radar in a way that isn't straight up like asking for money.
Just
and
asking
actually
for money.
adding
Yeah,
value
exactly.
First.
Exactly.
How interesting.
Yeah. I think adding
that.
value is just the most important thing in general. Even adding value to people who you have nothing to gain something from is always important. And that's what I think propels this community, really.
Yeah, amazing. Well, congratulations again. I know that the whole process is so grueling of raising capital, that it's like full of pain. How did you kind of balance it? Because I heard about you really keep strict with yourself in terms of priorities. For the team, you make sure that you're not too thinly spread. Like these are our milestones. This is our roadmap. How do you balance that when you've got fundraising going on at the same time? How do you make sure that you're staying true to those priorities?
I think there's always been this debate about having a co-founder and not having a co-founder, and I think this is one of the clear examples of where having a co-founder is so important, because if one of you has to focus on fundraising and keeping the company alive, the other one focuses also on keeping the company alive internally, and that's where my co-founder Sunil came in so much help. Honestly, people who I have a lot of respect for solo founders who go out there, because I don't know how they do it. At the same time, they're probably working 25 hours a day or whatever, I don't know, but the best thing to do is just find someone you can lean on who can help you along the way.
Fantastic, amazing. And well, again, kudos. It's great that you've got kind of a good co-founder relationship and a team that you can kind of build things up along with that. What I'm curious as well about is the you kind of you achieved these different things. I remember listening to you talk about how startup land, being an entrepreneur is so stressful that I think the way you phrased it was you acclimatize yourself to that constant sense of uncertainty, to the stress, which doesn't sound healthy, but it is the reality of startup life, obviously. So, what are some of those? You've mentioned, some really unexpected issues arose over the years. What was some real kind of like, shit's hit the fan? You mentioned about, manufacturing batches that didn't arrive.
Yeah, so a huge one was we had just closed our round of funding, and all these investors are there and holding their breath, ready for this big story, big success that we've promised. And I think the Ukraine war hit, I think, that month, and that very same month, I think it was like March or April 2022, and that had a knock-on effect with well, first of all, like the pricing of products and raw products around the world, and also the shipping length of time. And shipping lengths were already still quite long because of COVID. They were still pretty expensive and long. So suddenly there's this war we've got to contend with, where suddenly the cost of our goods was so high, and even if we did get them here, it would be so much more expensive. So we had to just be really, really smart with how we managed our finances and also customers, and making sure we didn't, manage their expectations right. And it was just this random thing that's just happened overnight. And you're just kind of like, of all the things that you would think would affect our business, you didn't think it would be something going on the other side of the world.
Right.
But that was something we dealt with. And I think just dealing with that uncertainty of, are we going to be able to afford this? Is it going to happen? Are we going to lose, loads of money straight away? Because each of our shipments is very expensive, because the product costs a lot to make each one. And so it's not like we can just fly them on a plane or whatever. And so it was very, very... a very uncertain period, and there have been many periods like that where we've just not been sure about, is this the right thing to do, is this the right technology that we should be using. And fortunately we seem to have just sort of come out and made it work, but it's been a very slow process of R&D and just getting there. But I think if it's worth it, if it's going to be difficult, it's probably worth doing, and we'll get there in the end.
I can imagine there's another level of nervousness, not only with a hardware business, but when you're exposed with an international supply chain. I don't know where your products are manufactured, or whether there's a whole link in the chain of like some parts coming from here, other parts are assembled there, and then they will need to be shipped in a container. So is that how it works? That are you kind of so exposed across all these different elements? Yeah.
I can't think of too many businesses that probably aren't, when it comes to making anything in electronics and screens and cameras. You would have a supply chain. It would be great to make things in the UK, and maybe one day soon we'll be able to do that. But unfortunately, that is the reality, and it's something which I think perhaps when people jump into physical product type businesses, it's something that maybe they don't always realize, is maybe even if your product is, I don't know, if you make a food and drink business and your drink is made in the UK, you might still need to get the packaging from abroad, or the bits and parts, and that could affect the entire thing if you can't package it up. So there's lots of considerations I think people should always kind of think about right from the start. Yeah,
we're all part of this wider, and I guess this is where like Brexit and war in Ukraine, and as you say, like things going on in other parts of the world that still affect you here at home, sat in London. So it's all part of that. So you did your course in entrepreneurship, but are there also like any books or entrepreneurs that you look up to, or anything that you've really that you look towards elsewhere to help guide you through those tough times, or know how to navigate some of those?
I've read a few of the big ones, the classics, like Shoe Dog, which is a great one.
I had a feeling you'd say that, because this is where I asked you the question. I sort of had Shoe Dog in my mind.
Because it's funny, because my co-founder Sunil and I went out to the Far East just 2 months ago, and it literally was a bit like Shoe Dog.
Felt like reliving that.
We're sitting in a tiny room at the back of some factory when it's like 40 degrees, and we're trying to like whip out our notepad and hash some deal with these guys. And we have like a translator with us, so it was very much like the Nike, a bit like the Nike story
in the early days.
Yeah, but I'll be honest, I'll tell you where I get a lot of value is actually in working with. So I've had a coach, I've got a therapist at the moment as well, who I speak with, who I actually meet once a week.
Amazing.
And in person, which makes a huge difference. And I think I'd recommend to any founders is if you can have like a crutch to lean on. Especially if there's someone who's somewhat been there before and been through walked the journey before, that adds so much value beyond whatever you're paying them to, just being able to sleep a little bit better and not be as stressed and deal with family things better. So I think having a coach for, you know, your personal life as well as perhaps business.
That's such a great piece of advice. And I am totally converted as well. I'm totally with you. I very, very naively used to think, you know, when I was first starting out in business, this is horror. I hate to say it. I've totally changed my mind on it, but I used to always look quite disparagingly at people who needed a coach, and whatever kind of coach. I used to be like, well, did you not go into business because you're a business person? Like, what, you know? And I used to think it was a bit of a pyramid scheme, sort of scam to it, until I met an amazing one who I've been working with for a few years, and I'm really opened my eyes up to. And like anything, you know, you mentioned Shoe Dog and Nike, and you've always got the sports and the entrepreneurship analogy, and it's like, well, the best athletes still need coaches.
Yes, absolutely.
So I love that, you know, you mentioned that you use a great one as well. So well done. Varun, it's been fantastic to have you. My final question, which I always end our episodes on, is the best lessons I think often come from the biggest mistakes. Again, strategy and tragedy, very much the highs and lows of business. What's one tragedy, if you will, that's happened to you that's really taught you the biggest lesson?
It kind of goes back to when I started off, when I was talking about how I was sitting in this bank and just pushing paper and just felt like a cog in the wheel. And one of the things I realized is that you can fail. Like when I was trying to decide, am I going to take a leap of faith and quit this corporate thing, or am I going to actually take a leap of faith in starting a business? And I remember hearing this quote, which was, you can fail at doing something that you don't like to do very much. So you can fail at doing something you don't like to do very much. So you might as well take a chance in doing what you love. And what I realized is I could have failed at just, you know, being in a comfortable environment where you just get paid and, you know, you bumble along. You can be happy. You can actually fail doing that. And so what I realized is you might as well take a chance in doing what you love, because you just don't know. It may end up working out.
Varun, it is so great to see you again. We're sat here now in spring 2025. We did our original recording about a year and a half ago at this point, maybe even longer. What has been the biggest game changer for you since we last sat down together?
We've done 2 funding rounds now, grown the team, grown the revenue massively. I think we're the fastest growing consumer company according to Sifted in the UK.
You touched on the fundraise. We're going to talk a bit more about that. What's the key that's unlocked your growth today in 2025 compared to when we last sat down?
Yeah, so we're very one-dimensional and really quite simple in our marketing approach, which is we only do performance at this stage. So we only invest in Meta and Google. We do have some retail, so we're in like Selfridges, for example. We're potentially launching in a couple of other big names, which I can't mention just yet. But that's going to be a big focus for 2025. But up until now, it's very much been D2C and focusing on Meta and Google. So we essentially figured out what worked for us, and then just doubled our ad spend, then tripled it, and now we're I think we'll probably spend a couple million this year just on Meta and Google. And the reason we have confidence that we can do that is just because we have a very strong kind of mathematical equation in terms of, if we spend, for every pound we spend, we get X back. And so it just gives us the confidence to know that if we continue scaling, we could potentially hit our forecast, what we're forecasting. And that's basically as simple as it is.
That makes a ton of sense. And to your point, you got your lean principles start from the very beginning. You're solving a problem, and then you've managed to secure that funding, which we're going to talk about, to be able to unlock scaling up your performance marketing. Just one thought that comes to mind as you mentioned that is, are you at all concerned about kind of that over reliance on those performance marketing channels? Because I remember when I last sat down with you, for example, we spoke about I think it was like COVID disrupting your supply chains. I know other product-based businesses, like they had Brexit completely changed the business. So the same sort of idea with those channels, right? So having all your eggs in the Meta and Google baskets, is that on your mind at all, to be like, okay, if they decide to like change an algorithm or they get hacked or whatever, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a great point. And actually our supply chain issues have only gotten more complex with the ongoing Ukraine war.
God, can imagine.
And then obviously with the recent tariff issues, which has destabilized a lot of things beyond just sort of America and China. And so it seems that we've now realized this is just the status quo of the world when you're shipping a physical good. I think your point is really interesting and very valid, which is, do people ever rely on one channel? And the fact is we probably are. But I think a big problem a lot of startups make is they try to diversify too quickly. So when you start a business, I think a lot of people are like, well, I have to be on Google, I have to be on Facebook, I have to be on Instagram, I have to be on TikTok, I have to be on Pinterest, I have to be posting regularly on LinkedIn, I have to invest in maybe retail, and you should go to events and conferences. And there doesn't seem to be like a very singular focus on one or two channels and making those one or two channels really, really work, and they end up spreading themselves too thin. So we're very much like, even though we're scaling very quickly, we're still very much only like 18 months into our, since we shipped our first product, 18 or maybe 20, 21 months now into shipping our first product. So for us, it's very much been about, let's just focus on one or two channels, make those channels work, and then move over to channel 3 and channel 4. We don't do anything on TikTok, for example, even though we know there is probably given our product is very visual, it's fitness, it's consumer, it should work very well on TikTok, but we just don't invest in it because right now it just makes sense for us to just focus, putting our eggs into one or two baskets and just seeing what happens there.
And that's very similar, actually resonates with the sort of story that I had with interview with Lottie White of Maya, which again, physical products in that fitness consumer sphere, all about do that one channel well, one or two. Don't spread yourself too thin. Don't get too distracted. And then from there, you can maybe start weaving in some more channels as you grow. On that note, let's just stick with that for a sec. Are there any specific, I'm going to get a little bit granular with you on this, given that you have had about 18 months or so to really kind of double down on the performance marketing. Are there any like specific little tips, tricks, like what has worked for you on the ad side of things? And that can be as specific as like all caps header, opening with a picture of you, like there's hooks that work for you.
Well, the pictures of me will scare everyone off. So they it all comes down to the creative, is what we realized. It's how good the creative is often helps Meta find the right customers, and then from there the algorithm gets smarter and smarter and finds more and more customers. I think the big thing is the hook for us, the first 3 seconds. I think the ads, a couple of ads that perform really well. One is where the whole ad is about how our trainer is so much more cheaper than the alternative, right? And the way we grab the hook is it's like a piggy bank, and the piggy bank drops on the floor and smashes, and all the coins come out, and then it moves into lady at home, and she's like working out and telling how she saved all this money by switching over to an AI personal trainer rather than paying £50 an hour for a human. And that ad performs really, really well. There is one of me which is going around, which I run through my own channel, which is like it's just a demo walkthrough of the product but it's done in a very unpolished environment. We actually did it at one of our trade shows. We did the Ideal Home Show, and I'm just kind of walking the customer through the thing. It's all done in one take. There's no like flashy effects or anything like that. And that's very much like one of those ads where when you see it, you don't think it will do well, but then when you watch it, when you see the stats, you just sort of realize actually people resonate with the simplicity and the authenticity behind it. So those are things that I think so far have worked really, really well for us. But the ad landscape's changing a lot. AI wasn't such a big thing in terms of ad creation and like in the last kind of year, and now it's kind of becoming top of mind for a lot of brands, and so that's something we want to lean more into, I think.
Okay, interesting. I love that you've given some really specific examples there. That was exactly the sort of thing that I was hoping for. And I see myself, like if I'm on Instagram, I'm kind of paying attention from that marketing perspective as well, to be like, there are a lot of these ads, especially on Reels, where you don't even notice it's an ad, to your point on the trade show one, where you're like, wait, I'm just getting served this content like from this guy. So switching gears a little bit, obviously you're able to boost your performance marketing thanks to the fundraising. So we're going to talk about that. In our original interview, what has still stuck with me to this day, Varun, I haven't even had to like re-listen to it, But what stuck with me and what I honestly tell other people if they're fundraising is your fantastic strategy of one unlocking two, two unlocking four, four unlocking eight on your angel investors. Because we
Right.
talked about you getting like Dan Murray Serta on board and how you're able to kind of play that game a little bit with the angels. See, angel investors are more for the beginning.
Yeah.
Now you've secured over 5 million funding, led by IW Capital. So huge congrats again. Can you share with our listeners, any other earlier stage entrepreneurs listening, what worked for you? Again, are there any like specific practical lessons learned that you can share, especially given how difficult it's been to fundraise these?
Yeah, it has been difficult, and I don't think that's necessarily a direct reflection on us and our company. I think that's sort of reflection on the overall market, the appetite for funds and investors to invest in anything, and particularly consumer hardware, connected fitness. All three are like I often said that they're sort of the trifecta of tricky industries at the moment that weren't as perhaps as enticing as software and B2B SaaS, right? I think the first tip is simply, and I know it's been said a lot of times before potentially, but you got to have grit in this game. It's a numbers game with VC funds, because if we had stopped trying to approach investors after we got rejected by the first 50, we wouldn't have the company anymore. If we stopped trying to fundraise after the first 100, we wouldn't have a company anymore. We had to take it to 150, and only then did we find, investor number 149 and 150, who ended up writing, multi-million pounds in investment for us. And then because they came in, we ended up pulling in, a bunch of others, and a number of our existing investors also came in as well. So the first thing, the grit thing does really work, and it is really, really important. There is an element of, you can't. I think people think they don't have a good business if they get rejected by 100, but you've got to stick with it. If you believe in your product, you believe in your vision, the problem you're solving. As I said, the best businesses are problems that are being solved. Then you have to follow through with grit, and that was the biggest lesson for us learning.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, you got to look at the market. Last year and I think the year before were the worst funding climate I think the UK has seen for about 6 or 7 years. I think in the whole of Q4, when we closed our round, I remember the Times published an article saying that there was only 36 funding rounds or something in the whole of the UK in that quarter, which was like the lowest quarter for 6 or 7 years.
Yeah.
And I think we were number 37 or
No
whatever.
way.
I was just like, there are going to be hundreds, thousands of entrepreneurs who are out there fundraising and believe they don't have good businesses or good business ideas because they're just not able to raise. And it's not because, they have to remember, it's not because they don't have a fundamentally strong business. It's just a bad market.
Yeah.
So
It's not me, it's you. On the grit, right? Like on the note of grit, which I love. Thank you so much for sharing that. And again, I'm just loving those specifics of even the fact of like 150. Like those are not just kind of random numbers you're pulling out. You're actually, we went through 148 to get the 149th, the 150th, as I understood it, like in your story there. Was it easier these latter, I don't know how many rounds you've done at this point, but the recent ones compared to when we last sat down, was it easier to go in with that level of grit and tenacity and resilience because you'd already done it before? Or was it harder? Were there any other challenges in the mix with that?
There were definitely elements that were easier in terms of putting together the deck and the materials and the data room financial model. So I understood a lot of those fundamentals straight away. I understood how to approach investors, how to get those meetings. So I think there was a lot of those sort of first principles that we were already jumping over. So from that perspective, easier. I think just because of the market, it was definitely harder to convince perhaps funds but funds who I thought would have been prime for this. Yeah. But then you've got to realize, as you said, it's you, not me, and actually you can't take these things personally, otherwise you wouldn't be able to survive here, right?
Do you struggle with that at all? Like we're all human, we all have our kind of sensitive moments, I guess, where it's like you're down in the dumps. Has that ever like got to you with those rejections, and how do you stay How are you able to actually practice what you preach with that, with like not taking it personally?
Yeah, very difficult. And there were definitely a handful of rejections which really stunk because we had done like 5 meetings
I'm
and
going to ask about that as well. Yeah.
all the way through to the very end, met them in person multiple times, multiple demos, pulled together 10, 15, 20 pieces of data for the data room for them. And then in the end, it didn't work out. And I think mentally it does take its toll. I think it has to, right?
On that note, sorry, I do want to come back to like how you keep picking yourself back up again, but I was exactly on that train of thought and going to ask, given that 150-ish that you reached out to, I imagine there were at least some in there that would continue that conversation and get to that level and then still not go through. Are there any, with that in mind, are there any like red flags you could point to, like now having been through that experience that you can pass on to maybe entrepreneurs coming up behind you?
Yeah, I think the first thing is whenever you want to talk to a fund, don't talk to the juniors or the associates. That's the first thing. And I think any seasoned entrepreneur who's raised a lot of money will probably tell you the same thing, which is like you want to be talking to the people who can move the needle. You want to be talking to the people who are the decision makers in the room, not the people who are basically just there to do the diligence and etc. I mean, by all means, talk to those people, but make sure the decision makers are in the room at the same time and part of the conversation. So I think one of the learnings is to make sure you're talking. You're not whatever time you're spending raising, you have to make sure that that's efficient, right, and time well spent. And so you want to be talking to the best people. I think that was one of the first things that I realized early on, and I think it's very, very important for people to know. I think first time entrepreneurs, they sort of maybe get a little bit nervous and dazed when they see a fund pop up in their inbox or on LinkedIn who say, oh, do you want to have a meeting, or they get an intro and perhaps they feel a little bit nervous because of the power dynamic, right? You're asking these people for money and now you're demanding you speak to someone who's perhaps of a higher in the organization. But I have to emphasize, look, if you've got a business that you believe is a strong business and your metrics are good, your product is great, you have all the chips as well, right? Like you shouldn't make it feel like it's a one-way street. It's definitely not. And those were the things that happened for us as well.
Was there anything else that you now know from those later rounds?
There are obviously platforms like Crunchbase that you can subscribe to that will tell you all this sort of angels, family offices, VC funds that are all investing, how much they're investing, how many investments and deals they've done, who's in their portfolio. And I think one thing which I realized is, we were talking to some of these funds, we were doing multiple meetings with them. And then you look at their Crunchbase, and in the last like 12, 18 months, they've done like 2 deals. And so what we realized is you also want to be talking to funds that are active. And remember, for a lot of VCs, they have to fill up their deal flow and their pipeline to show that they're still in business and to justify to their underlying investors that they are still working and still very much worthy of their capital they've invested. So they have to be filling up their quotas and numbers, but they may not have any real intention of doing any deals at the end of it. Or they may be just doing, 2 in a year, and 2 out of 2,000 they see is like numbers which are just ridiculous, right? It's just not even worth your time. So key thing is just make sure you're not getting strung along, and be upfront. When you talk to a fund for the very first time, say, look, how many deals have you done, and what were the size of those deals, and when did it close? And you've got to realize that they're going to be grilling you. You got to grill them back, right?
It's almost like an interview scenario, isn't it? Where again, with that power dynamic, where like you as the candidate get all this grilling, but you're like, well, what's your churn rate of your employees? What do employees love about learning here? There's almost that like, yeah, hang on a sec, like reclaim that power. Are you going to waste my time? My time is also valuable here. So I love that. Lots of practical tips there. What comes to mind is I've only ever heard one person give opposite fundraising advice, which was Marla Shapiro of Hermesa, which check out the interview if you want. I can put the link in the show notes. She actually was like going against the grain with like, it's not a numbers game. It's not about that like grit and tenacity to get through like the hundreds and hundreds. She was like, actually, you can save yourself all this heartache by doing almost like that sort of research and just be very selective with those few that you're reaching out. So now with hindsight, could we have saved ourselves that heartache?
Definitely, for sure. I think those are things I've learned, which you now. Look, the only way to learn in this particular game is really by doing. They're
Yeah,
not going to do this in university.
yeah, exactly.
There's actually not that many books out there which will go into the nitty gritty of stuff like this, like to the point where they're saying, "Have you checked Crunchbase and have you seen and asked these questions?" And so it's as I call it, the school of hard knocks. You have to actually be in it to really win it, and you're only going to learn by doing. And you will make mistakes. We've made a lot of mistakes along the way. There's funds who I think would have invested if we hadn't have made various mistakes, and vice versa. And so I think that's the key thing, is you've got to be in the arena, and that's the only way to kind of learn and get through it.
I am with you. I would just add to that. The whole purpose of this show, why I've created it, is to help people with exactly these sort of things, right? So absolutely, you need to be a player on the field. You need to be in it to win it in the game. But at the same time, if you're listening to this, you can take some of these lessons learned from Varun, who's so generously and kindly sharing the lessons that you've learned firsthand along the way as well. So this is why I appreciate you indulging me in that level of detail, of specific. So what would you do differently if you fundraise again now?
So first thing is, have all of your data up front. Get it into the data room before you've even spoken to a single investor, because the last thing you want to do is start pulling all of that stuff together when you're already in the midst of a conversation. It doesn't make it look like you've got your kind of ducks in a row, I suppose. Make sure you've had all of those materials proofread, your pitch deck, build a financial model, a rigorous one. And listen, most CEOs, most founders are not going to be able to do that themselves. I would hire a freelancer or someone, or a fractional CFO, to do that for you. And then be very strategic in who you approach first. So you might want to start by gathering in some smaller checks, angels, syndicates, and then once you've already got a certain amount committed, then start going perhaps to the larger funds who might be willing to write those big checks. But the other thing I would strongly emphasize is, and this is something which isn't obvious either from Crunchbase and reading the press, but you have to kind of really do a lot of diligence and perhaps a lot of surveying of portfolio founders, but figuring out who are the funds who are leading rounds and who are the ones who are just following, because not every fund or family office is going to lead an actual round, meaning they put in the largest check and set the price and the valuation. So you don't really want to be pitching the follow funds at the beginning, because they can only follow. They're not interested unless you've got the lead. So you're basically just chasing a bit of a dead end at that point. And also, it doesn't look that great either if you're trying to talk to a follow fund, but you don't even have a lead committed.
How do you find that out, given it doesn't say it on Crunchbase?
So I realized it when it's actually when you just look at press articles, you often see that it will say in the small print who led the round, and then it will also say who also participated in the round. And when they say participated, it means they pretty much came in afterwards, more often than not. So you kind of want to focus on the leads at the beginning, and a bit like fishing, right? You want to get the big fish in right at the start, and then all the others will follow afterwards. And that is the mentality that I think a lot of funds have. They have that herd mentality. If they see someone has put their stake in the ground and saying, we believe in this company, we're backing it to the tune of £1 million or whatever it might be, then they will feel compelled to follow as well.
Love that. And it does kind of mirror again that strategy with your angel investing, getting those angel investors on those early days as well, with leveraging a little bit of that psychology, like someone else has backed, someone else has put this much in, that herd mentality, as you say. What I'm also just sort of taking away from this as well, Varun, and this is all top tier advice, so thank you so much for sharing this, is also actually, correct me if I'm wrong here, but like spend more time doing that research. Like spend more time before you just dive straight in. Spend more time going through Crunchbase. How active are they? How many deals have they done in the past 12, 18 months? Who's led the rounds, who's followed on? Do that through those press articles. Make sure that you're targeting people who are more senior, or requesting to speak to people more senior. So I think those top three essentially will speak to spend a bit of time up front doing your research, doing your preparation, even with the data room as well. Get that all together first before you go out there.
Absolutely,
Nice
absolutely.
one, nice one. All right. So since we last spoke, and for anyone who is watching this on video, you will see all of the amazing like accolades and logos that Varun's got around here, which is so cool. I absolutely love that. Since achieved some incredible things, you mentioned that you were named one of the fastest growing UK consumer businesses, which is amazing. I'm so happy for you, Varun. Also been named one of Time's best inventions of 2024, ranked number 6 on the Sifted 100 list, which is amazing. So, Varun, I have to ask you, how have these recognitions actually impacted your company's performance? Have some of them sort of been the vanity stuff, which is the on LinkedIn, or how do they actually change your
Well, the
business?
good news is my parents and my in-laws don't think I'm a complete bum when they see these things. So they,
Biggest thing.
yeah, my grandma realizes I'm not just looking at myself in the mirror all day. It is actually something we're selling, and people do actually buy it. And so, listen, there is a vanity part in that sense. Like, it does give validation to, our networks, people around us, that we are building something that is of value and ideally changing people's lives, which I think is the most valuable thing for us. It signals to the ecosystem that this is a product that is worthy. Which and look, Time Magazine and Fast Company are both American publications. They look at the world, all the companies and products from around the world. It's not just America. And for us, as a little company that started in my garage in East London a few years ago, to be put on that stage with those publications, it's enormously inspiring for me and all of our team to know that we're building something that's valuable and making a difference in the world. And I think those are the things that have helped massively. And finally, it gives validation to our customers, right? It's a huge form of social proof that this is a stamp of approval, and we make all these bold claims about what our product can do, and it's been backed up by some of the best names. And I think that that's been enormously helpful for sales and traction as well.
I was just going to ask, are you able to see how that has actually impacted conversion rates, like website traffic?
We normally see a big spike on sort of the day that those pieces have been announced, which helps massively. They helped enormously for investor optics as well, given most of them happened during our fundraise. So that was a big, I'd recommend to any founders, if you're fundraising, definitely apply for as many awards and press as possible during that time, because it's only going to help the momentum, right? It's, if you're ever going to do it, that's the time to do it, right?
So, it's such a funny like psychology game, isn't it? You got to play with people, and it's like all of that. Just to very briefly mention, I'm kind of fresh off the stage last week from doing a talk at this conference.
It looks amazing. I saw your
Thank
pictures.
you.
Yeah.
Not this is not about me, obviously, but I just bring it up here on the power dynamic thing, because it's like approaching me, having seen me speak on stage, is like, oh my God, like all of this kind of like a validation, how much that affects how people view you versus, being another audience attendee. There's just this level of like kudos and credibility. So again, same here with these awards, these logos, while you're investing, while you're pitching, while you're getting people to, it works, right? Because it's just that, like, it's just human psychology.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, people buy into, particularly with consumer products, they buy into style more than they buy into substance initially. They want to, they're attracted to shiny things before they realize what's happening. And so these things really do help. And I do encourage anyone to apply and get involved.
That's interesting. That's super interesting. On the subject of accolades, achievements, perhaps one of the biggest achievements since we last spoke is, Varun, you are now a dad. You have now procreated.
Yeah.
How has that shifted things for you now becoming?
I think so the week my daughter was born was pretty much the week that we kicked off the fundraise. And it took a full 12 months from when we kicked off the raise so it was her first birthday pretty much when we closed the round.
Wow.
And so it was a full 12 months. And listen, having a baby and kicking off a fundraise, particularly in the environment that we saw, I would not recommend that to anyone. I think one of them is demanding enough. Doing both at the same time, crazy. So, but listen, that's life, isn't it? you can have all of the best laid plans
And you still
and
get punched in the face.
you see it back in the face. So
How
I
how did you
basically,
get through it? How did you manage?
enormously supportive partner, I think, is the first thing, because you're not going to be able to get through it without a partner, my wife Anisha, who helps prioritize things, meaning she lets me prioritize the things I needed to do to get this across the line, and all of the mechanics around that, whether that be, you know, making sure I got enough sleep and making sure I was alert and ready for work, and making sure I was able to go off and, you know, go into my office and work for the hours I needed to get this done. And I think having those priorities set from the beginning is so important for anyone. But it's enormously rewarding, you know, being a dad, and yeah, 17, almost 18 months as of next week I'll be in, and it's very rewarding.
Congratulations. And I didn't actually realize that the fundraise, sorry, going back to that for a sec, was 12 months. It sounds like a long time. I mean, even just for you and your co-founder, the team to kind of keep going, let alone having a newborn in the mix as well. I presume that wasn't part of the plan. How were you able to stay resilient across 12 months of fundraising at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, I think back in the old sort of, like when we did our last round, it was sort of open and closed in about 3 months, maybe a little bit more, maybe four at most,
Difference.
including the legals and stuff. And in this round, it took a full 12 months, and I think that is symptomatic of the market as a whole.
Yeah.
You know, rounds are taking longer to close. If you do it in 6 months, I think that's considered pretty decent. But yeah, for us, it was about 12. Bearing in mind, by the way, that doesn't mean we're pitching investors for 12 months. That includes doing all the legals, all the, you know, back and forth due diligence and the rest of it. So that's that. But I think anyone fundraising even now, I think you'd expect, you know, six plus months.
Yeah, okay, good tip. I love that. Finally, Varun, just before I let you get back to world domination, looking ahead, what's next for you guys? You mentioned there are some new retailers coming up you can't actually name at the moment. Anything else that you can share? Any new innovations? What can
Oh,
we...
I'm very excited about, so retail will be a big one for this year, but actually in terms of the product itself, we're really excited. We just launched yoga, which last week, which has got off to an enormously positive start. It was our most requested modality for at least a year.
Wow.
With what we do, because we have to build all the AI tracking into every single yoga move, it's not just as simple as just shooting a bunch of yoga classes and then uploading it. There's a whole process of tech and R&D that goes on behind the scenes. So that's been really exciting to get off the ground. And the other one is body scanning. So we're going a lot deeper into not just sort of fitness, but deeper into health and health tracking and monitoring, because everyone nowadays loves to wear their Whoop and their Oura Ring and their Fitbit, obviously Apple Watch. And what we want to do is go deeper into being a health monitoring device as well, where people can, from the camera, get a scan of their body. They can get a reading into their biometrics, so their body fat, their muscle mass, their rate of aging, their calories, their heart rate and variability. And this is something we launched actually just this last week. So we haven't done a big sort of press push around it yet, but I think this is the first time I'm talking about it sort of on a podcast.
Nice. Strategy exclusive. I love it when I get these.
I'm not going to see it on our website or anything yet, but it's an enormously powerful feature which basically really takes this product into a different dimension, right? It's this mirror that lives on your wall, and the entire family can get a reading into their health literally in a matter of 30 seconds.
Varun, this is so exciting. I'm so happy for you. It's been so great to reconnect and almost have this as draw the line in the sand, have this as a marker in time with where you looking back on when we last sat down together, everything that you've achieved since. You've been so generous with sharing what worked for you, tips, tricks, and it sounds like this is still just the beginning, Varun. So maybe we'll sit down again in another couple of years and see where you're at.
Yeah, let's make this an every 2-year thing.
I'd love
and
that.
congratulations, by the way, for everything you've achieved with the podcast. I mean, the guests have been getting bigger and bigger, and the tractions has been getting. I mean, I'm seeing it on my feed every week. So well done. Yeah.
Thank you. Very kind of you. Thank you, Varun. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much for listening. Again, as Varun's just mentioned, the show is growing. It is getting bigger, and that is all thanks to you guys. I'm super grateful to you. Honestly, it's not lost on me how many podcasts are out there in the world. So Thanks to you, I get to sit down, interview amazing entrepreneurs like Baron and get him sharing all these amazing tips and tricks that hopefully help you in your journey as well. So, as usual, don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and we will see you next time.